Hello everyone, welcome back to our YouTube channel. I am your host, principal lawyer and founder of MeLaw, and today we're going to be discussing the life of a lawyer, especially a lawyer who's got a busy practice and runs everything and, also has a family. You're going to expect that from different lawyers and so forth. So let's get started. So for you to get to know what is in a day in the life of a lawyer, or really, what does it take to be a lawyer? I've got some questions coming to me from a whole bunch of you asking various things about what lawyers do and so forth. So let's get started.
Question number 1, how do you handle stress as a lawyer?
Oh my God, that's probably the number one question that a lot of lawyers probably get asked from, friends, family, or anybody that isn't in the legal world or have been involved in the legal matters. Your clients don't tend to think that, you are undergoing any kind of stress because they're stressed themselves, right? And they're dealing with a pressing legal matter, and sometimes they are just focused on that matter. So they expect that when they go to the lawyer who's handling that matter, that they're not stressed. So for me, what I do, and I think a lot of lawyers do this, is we work out. We have to sleep right. So sometimes our sleep isn't that great. So some days we're not sleeping well and other days we're sleeping great. So we have to try to manage our sleep. And I think the number one thing is for me that works is that I like to work out. I go to the gym. I spend time outside. I try to take some holidays to get some breathing, just even if that's just driving out the city for the weekend. And I think that, it's important. So that's how I handle stress. And I think my colleagues would agree that that's how majority of them handle stress.
Question number 2, how do you manage and prioritize your caseload?
So it's really important to understand that if you're a trial lawyer, you have to dedicate time of the year to your trials. So you have to think in advance. You have to brainstorm in advance. How many files can I take this year if I have 2 or 3 trials? Because trial preparation is key to successful outcome at trials. Some lawyers, depending on how big the trial is going to be, and usually if it's going to trial and it's a civil trial, it might be really big. So sometimes you need like a month or 2 just to prepare. Make sure your witnesses are prepared. Make sure your documents are prepared. So what I do is I prioritize it that way. So if I have like trials or applications or motions coming up, I know that as a firm owner, that if I do, if clients want to retain me and they're adamant to retain me, either we receive them and we have, I do have dedicated staff, so I have lawyers and so forth, and they work on the files. And then I could focus on if I'm asked to do big trials and there's no other way around it. So I could focus on that. Another thing is that's really important to me and important to a lot of clients and maybe a lot of lawyers out there is you have to look at deadlines and how pressing a legal matter is. Right? So if someone is being threatened that a lien will be placed on, their condo or their house for something, let's say a contract or, money they owe, let's say to their condo board, then that's a pressing issue. And that is something you need to deal with off the fly. So what I tend to do is I ask my clients, what is it that they need to have done now? And that's how I would prioritize, the matters and so forth.
Question number 3, how would you describe your approach in the courtroom?
Oh, I love being in the courtroom. So it really depends on your situation, right? So if, I wouldn't say that I need to be aggressive. I think that there are times when my aggression comes out, but I think the way I play with my words, I think is one thing. And you have to understand that at the end of the day, you want the judge to side with you. A judge isn't going to side with you if you're yelling and screaming, right? The law, your facts have to be in order and your evidence in order to persuade the judge. So I look at it this way. If I'm in the courtroom and I'm doing submissions in front of the judge, I will make it as easy as possible for the judge to understand, okay, what's going on with the evidence that was presented, my legal arguments and so forth, and I'm open to being asked questions. If it comes to witnesses and so forth, you're going to deal with hostile witnesses all the time. You have to be able to think of that in advance before you enter the courtroom and you cross the witnesses, that you have to prepare for these, for that sort of scenario. And then you have to prepare questions to kind of anticipate that scenario. So for example, if they're refusing to answer the question, and the question is pretty straightforward, and it doesn't require refusal, especially in the courtroom, then you can either look at it as calling it for something for your case, to tell the judge, like, listen, a simple question that can make or break this case is not even being answered, and the court will infer certain things from that if you tell the court to infer. And in the same thing, if, they go on a tangent and so forth about a certain question you're asking, then again, that's, you can use that to kind of, better, use it for your case. But I think the number one thing is all lawyers have to, they have a duty to the court. They're officers of the court at the end of the day. So they have to respect the court. They have to respect the opposing counsel. They have to respect the witnesses. They have to respect the experts. At the end of the day, you have to represent yourself, because judges remember. They remember when you appear in front of them. They remember who you are. They remember the type of arguments you make. So, and, I've had judges who love appearing in front of me because they just love, the way I handle my case. So you need to be able to build that reputation, because it's, judges will read everything. They just, sometimes they want to see you in court, so I think that it's very important that we go to court and so forth and do that.
Question number 4, how do you stay involved within the legal community?
That's a good question. Now, as much as I wish I can be involved more than I am, it's very difficult when you're running a business to kind of, and growing, and you're playing so many hats, wearing so many hats, playing so many roles. For me, it's really important that, one, I try to attend events as much as I can within the legal community. So I try to be part of, legal organizations that appeal to me. Okay. Number 2, I try to, network with other lawyers. So I try to go out and meet other lawyers that are not necessarily within my field. It's nice just to, like, for example, I have a lot in common with lawyers that start their businesses or have their businesses running. So it's nice to get in touch with those lawyers and kind of we share ideas as to, like, what works for our business and, the struggles we face and so forth. Another thing I do is I try to mentor students. So for example, I do things like, coach moot teams or go out and, like, speak to students. So I try to get involved as much as I can. I'm really big on, like, LinkedIn with some lawyers. I'm big on Twitter with some lawyers. So I try to engage with all these lawyers. And to be fair and honest with you, when I started as a lawyer, I didn't start in civil litigation, but I met in the last couple of years, I met a lot of lawyers. Like, when I went out on my own in 2019, met a lot of lawyers, who I kind of, reach out to when I have any questions, that basically will tell you they've seen me go from, like, really, really small, like, building myself to where I am now. And those lawyers I've met really off Twitter, like my involvement with the legal community on Twitter, and putting myself out there, wanting to meet other lawyers, meet other professionals. I'm very an approachable person, but at the end of the day, listen, not everybody's like that, right? So don't be afraid to go out and really just put yourself out there and let people get to know who you are.
Question number 5, please describe your academic background and articling experience.
So, when I was growing up, I had 2 options in life. Really, I've either wanted to be a journalist or a lawyer. I remember in the back of my mind, I actually was in a grade 5. I think it was grade 5 or grade 6 class, and we had to draw in the box, like, what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I drew myself I'm not the best creatively drawing, but I am really good with creative with words. But I drew myself as wearing a black robe like a lawyer. And funny has it, actually my teacher that taught me that class is now retired, but we follow each other on Facebook. But I remember drawing myself as a lawyer. But I had to overcome so many challenges in school, like, they said I had a learning disability that I had to overcome. I was often told, like, why am I doing these things? Why am I trying to progress myself? And I think the fact that I had to fight against this adversity my entire life is why I am where I am. And I think that the fact that I had to, not only fight against this adversity, but prove to people that I can be what I want to be. So I went through, high school being labeled that, why are you doing this? You need extra time, doing your exams, so forth and so forth. None of my, and then when I switched schools in grade 12, I was graduating grade 12 with the OACs, and I got into U of T for my undergrad. And, at that time, the guidance counselor decided, okay, you can't bring this into your school. Like, you can't bring that label into your university because we don't want it to stop you from achieving any academic, goals. So I went through university, and then after university, I took a year out, finished my undergrad. I then went to do journalism. So I did a 2-year postgrad in journalism. And before I went to journalism, I actually I wrote for U of T. I wrote for 2 newspapers at U of T. I forget, one was the Median at UTM, and one was, believe it was called the newspaper or something like that. It was years ago. Like, I graduated from UT years ago. So my first article that I wrote that got me the ability to write for those 2 newspapers was, I wrote about how Bolivians were being taxed for collecting rainwater and converting that rainwater into drinking water. And I felt that was, for me, that was like, somebody needs to be, to tell these people, to tell the world as to what the problems other people are facing. And I got into journalism, and I realized that it isn't what it seems to be, that you still have to answer to a sponsor, you still have to do these things. And I thought it was like, I built my whole mind around this, like, whole thing that it's investigative. You investigate, you get to people's issues, you get to their problems. So I did that for 2 years, and I took a year out, and then I went to law school, and I absolutely, like, it was the greatest decision I made. So after law school, I didn't know, like, my parents, they're hardworking immigrants, so they didn't know any lawyers, and they didn't, and I didn't have any family here that, had those type of jobs, or, were bankers or lawyers, or like anybody as a professional. So for me, I had to really push myself out there. I put myself out there. And I think that that's, why I would say I'm successful where I'm at. And I'm not afraid to fight for my clients. Like, at the end of the day, I didn't do the regular stream of articling. What I mean by that is that I didn't know there was on-campus interviews, because I went to law school in the United Kingdom. I didn't know there was on-campus interviews. I didn't know that the Law Society has information of Ontario Story, has information as to when you put your resumes, when you do, like, the specific articling block in the summer where they do interviews. I didn't know any of that. So I was, for me, I basically put packages together, and I just sent a little over 500 articling resumes. I just cold called. I sent, resumes, cover letters to different firms. And then after doing that, I didn't give up. I kept going until I remember I sent 500. And I got one call, and it was for a criminal law firm. And I was drawn to criminal law in the beginning because I thought that, I'm a big advocate of the charter, and the charter is amazing. And then, but I excelled in tort law, I excelled in wills and estate law, I excelled in a lot of areas, property law in law school. I did really well in law school. So for me, it wasn't just the fact that I started out crim, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the area I eventually opened my practice in. So I articled in criminal law. It was a very tough experience. By tough experience, I was paid pennies and I worked long hours. I also studied for my bar and solicitor exams while working long hours. And then after my articles, I was hired on. So I was hired on. I stayed at that firm for 6 months. That firm taught me so much. I went to another criminal law firm. And my thing was that I wanted to learn how to be an advocate. I wanted to learn how to go to court. I wanted to go to court. I wanted to argue. I wanted to gain those basic, most important skill set, regardless of what area of law you work in. In litigation, you need to know how to stand up in court and how to address the court and how to do trials. So that was majority of my training. Was I spent a couple of years at a criminal law firm after I left the previous firm where I articled and was associate for. 3 years doing back-to-back trials. So I wasn't even given an office day except on a Sunday. I had some afternoons, but not necessarily afternoons where you can sit and focus on trials. So I spent a lot of time learning that advocacy is the key to really pushing your clients' matter. So in 2019, I said, as much as criminal law was great, it wasn't for me. I loved other areas of law. I took courses. I took, for example, I did a couple Osgood professional development courses in different areas to learn about procedural stuff and materials and so forth about the different areas. And then I just took it and I ran. And for me, like I said, the adversity, the having to push, the having to learn, having to really say that you can do it, and that's how I lived my whole life. I can do it. Made me really successful. And I've done civil trials. And I've gone, I've done applications, I've done motions, I've done so forth. This is a long answer, and I'm willing to talk more about it if anybody wants to discuss it with me. But it is like, I did have the support of individuals who basically believed in me. But yeah, so that's what I hope that answers your question. It's kind of long, but that's how I'm here now. So.
Hey May, thank you for taking the time to answer the questions from the public.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If you have any questions, please email us at office@melaw.ca or give us a call at 416-606-5405. Have a good day. Take care.